Hi, I'm Maxine Penny. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a DJ and co-founder of Goddess of Queens. I have a background in culture management and I'm passionate about bringing people together from all walks of life. And in this episode, I'm so excited to bring two wonderful people together who have an amazing story to share. First, I'd like to give a big shout out to Wink, which is a worldwide award-winning experiential marketing agency in Amsterdam and New York. They connect brands to people and culture, so we really feel at home here in their Amsterdam office where we're recording. So again, we're really excited to share these nuggets of wisdom with you today. And on the show, we have Toshi Reagon.
Yes, you did it. Yes.
I did it. Welcome.
Thank you.
Toshi is a multi-talented and versatile singer, composer, musician, curator, and producer with a profound ear for the sonic Americana. Her expansive career includes residencies at Carnegie Hall, the Paris Opera House, and multiple venues and festivals nationally and internationally. A highly collaborative artist, she has worked with many musicians, choreographers, film and theatre makers. And in 2018, she created a production company, Wise Reagon Arts.
There you go.
Wise Reagon Arts, I got it. To initially produce the opera Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower, co-created and composed by Toshi and her mother, singer, composer, scholar, producer, activist Bernice Johnson Reagon. As the 2024 opera has been presented on 3 continents and has been seen by over 45,000 audience members, Toshi continues to present and collaborate with artists and practitioners of all kinds. She continues to tour as a solo artist with her band Toshi Reagon and Big Lovely. Check out her music and be prepared to be moved like I was this morning.
Yay.
Yay. We've also got the great Bob Alotta. J. Bob Alotta, hi.
Hey there.
Hey, welcome. Bob is building an internet that serves the many and not the few, and it requires a global movement. And it's her role to rally and focus that collective power. Bob is the Senior Vice President Global Programs at Mozilla, where they lead an international portfolio of events, research, fellowships, and awards centered on trustworthy AI and data agency. And prior to that, Bob led the Astria Lesbian Foundation for Justice, providing critical resources for the LGBTQIA+ activists and artists around the world. Now, I was introduced to both of you actually at the Mozfest in Rotterdam last year, where you presented Songs of the Living in collaboration with Together Dedicated. And it was the first time I've come across the Songs of the Living, inspired by Octavia E. Butler's, and I've been a massive nerd and gone out and bought the books now. So they're on my list to read.
Yes.
And it really pays homage to the use of the song and vibration as technology, which we spoke about, Toshi, as a way to create sanctuary and maintain survival in a testament to the resilience of her ancestors. And I've taken them up on their offer. Now they're in Amsterdam to become an active and vocal participant in the movement to reclaim our humanity and environment alongside the internet. And I will join the choir and perform with them and the wonderful team. I'll keep you up to date and you can follow our respective profiles, which I'll share in the description. But going back to where we first met, I was asked a question, and it was, if you were navigating the vast universe of technology as a spaceship captain, what would be your mission? And I remember saying that I would have a spaceship called The One, and my mission would be dedicated to flying around and bringing everyone together in the galaxy through the thumping bass lines. I can't remember. What did you say, Bob? I can't remember.
That's a great question, and I'm going to lie because, of course, I also don't remember what I said. But I'll piggyback on you. I believe in the congregation 1,000%. So for me, I think it would be to bring as many folks together along for the ride as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Toshi?
Yeah, I think my friend Adrienne Marie Brown, she did this book where she had all of these stories. It was called Octavia's Brood, and it was short stories, science fiction stories. And I don't think I would be like trying to gather everybody. I think I would be trying to gather some very particular.
I mean, the lights that go up, you just sort of suck the people up into the spaceship, but it's particular people.
I guess
You might be able to put them back down on the ground.
No, because this is once it was this.
Send them home.
Yeah, because look at how we acting now. So if I'm going to be in a galaxy, I am looking for people who have like really like, they just don't feel like it's proper to be destructive and kill, and also like trying to have some balance in whatever their relationship is to places we might go, because the planets are all very different. So it's not like, you can go, it's not like you're going to Earth anymore. You're going to all these other planets, right? That's how we're imagining it.
They have to be on the guest list.
Yeah, or they just need to be like, I'm down for this for this transportation because it's unknown. And so like the ship might be amazing, but then you're like, oh, we're going to go to other places. Then it's a difference to me. If it's a ship that we just travel on and we never land, that's one possibility. If we travel and we're going to land, we need to have like some understandings of behaviors, because humans are very, emotional, and it's our emotions that get us into practices that are not very good for any place we choose to live.
True. So we have to do the work.
We have to do the work.
We have to be ready.
You're going to be on this ship.
Even in the intergalactic fantasy of us, we have to do the work.
I don't trust us on any spectrum of existence without doing some work. At this point, I'm like, no, we have to have, some meditations and some transformations before we can do anything.
Toshi's like, I've met us.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you're from the future. You've already seen it. You know, we could send some meditations out onto the ship. Like through form.
Word.
Yeah, alongside the musical meditation in music.
Yes,
right?
all of it. Everything, healing, just everything like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna call you up when I start to build this spaceship.
we expect that call.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yes.
Good. And I know I just did a big intro, but it's always nice if you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourselves and where you're based and why today we're going to talk about songs of the living and technology and music.
Well, hey again. I'm Bob Alotta. I hail from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm usually on a plane. And so I spend about 60 or 70% of my time elsewhere. I don't like flying, but I like arriving. Mm-hmm. And I have the really good fortune of living and working globally for about 12 years and gathering with activists and artists and technologists at the intersection of technology and human rights. And for me, my background is as a filmmaker before I ever stepped into, and an activist, a media activist, before I ever had anything to do with philanthropy or technology formally. And it became really clear to me early on that if the movements I most cared about, which were those who were trying to shift power and redistribute disparate flows of capital, that we were going to have to create as many leapfrog moments as possible. And by that I mean bend time. And the ways that I know to bend time are through various technologies, which is how maybe this conversation even winds up being part of my world. I think when we have emotional and spiritual experiences, technological experiences, that we shift narratives from linear ones, which have already been written for us, which is the status quo or the way power is currently distributed, to nonlinear ones, which have different potential outcomes and could actually work out in our favor. And so once I started going around the world and meeting all these people, feminists all over the world, queer activists, folks doing things in different ways, I realized a few things. One is there's so many more of us than them, and you'd never know it because of the echo chamber that we're constricted to. And two, we deeply have the power to win. And we just need to know that and get to see each other and meet each other. So that's why I'm willing to be on a plane, even though it doesn't make any kind of sense ecologically, psychospiritually. But but arriving and being in community in a particular kind of way, and then having the ability to gather people, which is what we're doing now in MozFest. But I do that all the time, whether it's dinner or a formal festival or an intimate gathering of activists and artists, is if you're in a room with somebody you otherwise never would have met, if we can do that, if we can multiply that, the impact of us being in proximity to one another and assuming all of us are the experts and none of us are the experts, then we can bend time to our advantage. And so that's when I started bringing activists and technologists and healers together. And for me, music and all art forms are one of our most original technologies and our most immediate ways to have an emotional experience, to stop only being intellectual about our problems or our solutions. And that's why in any space that I build, including the Mozilla Festival, you will always find artists. And the bottom line is that there's no artist on the planet who I trust more to do that very spiritual and kinetic work than Toshi.
Amazing. I mean, yes, the influence around you and the people next to you can really, share things when you're together. And I really, truly believe that. And also music and bringing people together is, one of my big passions as well. And that's why it was so great to meet you. And thanks for sharing. Toshi.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm Toshi Reagon, and I am also from Brooklyn. I'm a child of the South of the United States. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and my family's come from Albany, Georgia on my mother's side, and Nashville, Tennessee on my dad's side. And both sides of my family have a lot of music and courageous activism in them, and so. It's funny because when people used to ask me if I was an artist, I'm like, we sing because we have to. And we sing because of the transportation that it gives us. And we sing everything. We sing prayers. We sing songs, children's songs, games, work songs. We sing to know what's happening. We come from people who were legally not allowed to read and write for hundreds of years. And so we had to know where we were and what we were doing. And usually that was through the technology of song and the technology, artist technologies, food technologies, growing food and being in relationship to the land. And so that's the history and foundation of where I come from. And at a very early age, I thought I would be an athlete, and I had an injury where they were like, "You're not going to run anymore," and then I just said I'll be a musician at 13, and then that was it. My mother told me to learn how to be a producer, so I wouldn't have to wait for somebody to say I was worth being seen. And so right away, I ended up being an intern at a women's production company in Washington, D.C., where I lived at the time. And then I produced my first concert at 17. And then I've produced everything or co-produced everything I've done since, usually co-production because I work in congregation. So not just musically, but as a way of doing work, period. So that's a short story.
Amazing. It's funny when you say congregation because I grew up in a really religious family and I never hear anyone use that word, but it's nice to hear it in this instance because it is about, community and congregating and sharing, those things. And I think you described earlier about your ancestors' music as being a living manifesto. I'd like to dive a little bit more into that, and it was about their right to exist and how their music served as a form of resistance and affirmation.
Yeah, I mean, you have to live. You're alive, and when you realize like that you're in such dangerous places, and you're being asked to do so many things at once. You're being asked to be in a dangerous place, then you're being asked to accept that you're in a dangerous place. Then you're being asked to serve from a dangerous place. And then you're asked to admire and hold the energy and insecurities and violence of the people who have trapped you in this dangerous place, and then it's just impossible. And then, you're asked to have children in this terrible place. Then you are asked to watch your children be taken away from you. And then you're supposed to just stay being on some level of existence that is possible. And I think, for all of the people who are living right now on planet Earth who don't have access to themselves, in terms of where their bodies can be and what they can do, or if you come from those people, everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's a horrific situation. And the contradictions is that usually people who do things like that name themselves as great, name themselves as being equal, name themselves as if they're creating opportunities for everyone, name themselves in all of these, use this beautiful language and say that they're being righteous and they're being innovative, and they're just being violent and horrific. So my people were like, no, we know who we are, and we know who we're supposed to be, and we know that we are being treated badly. And they always, I was born in 1964 in the U.S., and I'm the first generation on my mom's side that didn't pick cotton. So, and we can go boom, 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 and be into our ancestors who were enslaved. And so the narratives of our people is very alive and very rich and very much in the music. And I never get tired of singing their music and innovating off of it. My music doesn't sound the same at all. Most of the people in my family were a cappella singers, and I'm the one who learned how to play like a lot of instruments, and then just be who I am. But it doesn't matter how you work with the music. That vibration is there, and the truth is there, and that is the most important thing. And no matter how they try, they can't kill it. So
amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob, you said something that caught my attention about being a media activist. What does that mean? You're both activists. I love sitting here with you and being inspired. So yeah, I would like to know a bit more about that.
I think that there's a way that when I talk about bending time, they're the people who immediately are like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then they're the folks who just shut off. They're like, that's not possible. But what does it mean actually for Toshi to be singing actual lines of, I'm making air quotes, code from the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th century, to then maybe sing those same lines and put them in a pentameter or a musical arrangement from 2024. You're alchemically doing something. And the person, you may not know the history, like in the bio, you talked about Sonic Americana, and that's real, right? Like that's actually real, that there are multiple languages that are geographically specific, that are geographically transcendent, that are metered and have pentameter timing, that are literally the same lyrics, that actually the etymology or the of the language is transatlantic, does emanate from the continent, right? That's what I'm talking about. So that even if you know the history or you don't know the history, you have an experience with that, and you change. We change. And I really loved the call in about the like, oh, you said congregation and I go church and now I don't want to talk to you no more. Because because that's also violent, right? Mm-hmm. That some experience of being in right relationship in a group can be so oppressive that that's you right. don't want it anymore. That's a reclamation to say, actually, we're in congregation right now. That's what this podcast is, right? And that, I know I can sound esoteric, but I'm being quite literal in what I'm saying is possible and what I have certainly borne witness to. And we're at a time where there's such deep, violent attempts at repression, and that is direct response to the glorious power and our magnificence that we have exerted. It is a backlash. It is a persistent backlash. And so we can't, in 2024, there are more elections than have ever happened globally at the same time. That is so intense to realize that 49 billion people are voting. Like, what?
Yes.
And in every supposed democracy, and we have yet to see a democracy truly realized. But certainly its attempt is worth it, right? That's our human experiment, is to try to be right with each other in congregation. And so that's what I mean. I just want to be really clear that I'm not pulling lines out of my face, that I'm actually saying that I know what we can do.
Right.
And so we have to create the environment so we can do it. So there's that. Okay, now your actual question. What I meant by media activist is I lived as a filmmaker for many, many years, but used video to both document and bear witness in multiple forms. So we would do cop watches where we would video after dark in the United States, but also around the world in different jurisdictions. And before cops ever wore cameras and before people had cell phones, right? So really creating the kind of precursor to that of like, actually, we're going to document how you're behaving with our communities, particularly around kids of color in the U.S. But I also have done that in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Nablus, outside of Paris, in London. So really using filmmaking and documentary filmmaking in particular, using the camera as a point of privilege to try to protect people and or lay bare what people were experiencing. So that's one way. And then also using technology to connect people. So a number of years ago, I was running a new media production company, and I was one of the few or the only woman producer on the floor of Fashion Week in New York who was in a technical position. But I used that income to then produce the first online tribunal of atrocities against, at the time, Burmese women. And it was kind of in the early days of streaming. I know I sound like I'm 4,000 years old. I'm not that. But back when me and Fred Flintstone had to peddle the internet.
Back when I was younger.
Yeah, exactly. And I walked 40 miles to school. But in any case, like even using, always kind of looking at the way technology could be used to benefit people's rights or to expose how people's rights were being violated. So that's what I mean by a media activist.
Yeah, amazing. And Toshi, you often use technology to describe of your voice. So you both use technology in a way that's, innovative or maybe not. What's your take on that?
I mean, I definitely see lots of things as, use of or creation of technology. I think for a long time, what, people actually do, doesn't get named, especially if they're being oppressed or owned. But I remember like talking to someone about farming in the U.S. and in that how like our ancestors, there were people who were very good at it, right? They knew when to plant and how to treat the earth and all of these things, even coming from different places where this wasn't like what they did, but they developed a consciousness around it and understanding of it, and how those people would be very valued, but also because overall the land wasn't valued and the people weren't valued, all of these like horrible practices come out of it. And they're having a race towards inside of the field of technology. How can we make this happen faster? How can we do this faster? And all of these like very, human beings are the technology that they're using to do everything. And then they invent a machine to like do what the humans did. And then in order to have enough people, so if you want cotton to be picked faster in the cotton gin, but then you want more people to be able to pick the cotton, to do this and do that, then you start breeding. So in order to have more people. It's just like, it just is, so it's all about these, technological fields. And just because they started before there was electricity doesn't mean that that's not what it is. Just the whole way that empire uses, technology as an excuse for their bad behavior. Well, if we do this, we can get this faster. If we do that faster, then we'll have more money. If we have more money, then we can dominate, everything. But it's hand in hand with violence and thievery. And honestly, and rape. Like, it's literally, those are the ingredients: violence, thievery, rape. And, and then now we have a machine, and all of the advances in technological industries have never left that formula. And so that's why I'm like, but my technological roots start in the earth and start with our bodies and start with the vibrations that our bodies can make. Because that's the technology my people use to make sure I would know who I am. So it is, and I think there's also this like technological use of religion that when you were like, oh my God, congregation.
I'm back.
Yes. and some of that was really important, very, very important to see that this wasn't all there is. Like, I would just always imagine my ancestors, like we like kind of focus the beginning and the end. But I'm like, all of those generations of people that were within that idea of beginning and endings had to have a way of being like, because if 3 generations of your family did the same thing, you would maybe think it will never end, So the technology of seeing more than your oppressor. So we were always singing about death. There's so many songs about death. It's like, you're going to die. And when you die, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then you are going to be free. And this is going to happen. And then that became an analogy for actually how to free yourself. So we was doing everything. We was getting it. So yeah, the congregation really is, like, we call the opera that we made a congregational opera, which is something Alexis Pauline Gumbs, the great Alexis Pauline Gumbs, said, because she hears me talking about congregation, but she said, this congregational opera, blah, 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 blah. And when she said that on stage, I was like, that's what we are. So pulling it from this, I don't know what religious person claimed it, but we pulling it and using it for everything now.
I mean, I always like to think about pulling together like a religious 4.0, the best of each religion, in each world. That's so what great. I wanted, because not to badmouth religion, because there was a need in our family for that comfort and that community. When you're growing up in it, sometimes it seems very abrasive and you're like, why am I trying to be controlled? But what's funny is that I left to find another congregation, but just my own. Like you said earlier, that choice that you have of your own, the people that you choose to surround yourself with. But that's what we all need, right? We need that connection. We need that understanding. We need that congregation around us.
It's kind of my childhood. I grew up in a family that was both diasporic and half of which had been exiled, and my parents were of different religions. And I grew up in a neighborhood in Queens, actually, which is
yes, of Queens.
Yeah, Queens,
global baby.
Yeah, which is the second most diverse neighborhood in the world, next to Sao Paulo. And in this neighborhood, there are 70 nationalities and over like 140 languages spoken, which also meant that people practice lots of different religions. And so I would invite myself with my friends to all their like Sunday schools, religious services. They even like the Catholic kids got to leave school early on Wednesdays, and I snuck out and went with them.
You were also Catholic.
Yeah, yes, but not to cut class, to actually attend. Okay. And then I would argue like each week what I'd learned in the one before. And I was a little kid, so they'd be like, "Who is this child?" Like, I would be like, "Well, they said da 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 da," and I was so into it. Like
amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, my parents actually did say like, don't be a sheep. Like, go out and look at other religions and look, but come back to ours, of course. Like, go and have a look, but don't touch. But it opened my eyes to a lot of other things, and.
So that's funny because my mom, she took us, but she was like, you know what, you don't have to be baptized or anything. Just when you get grown, you'll decide what religion you want. As I always liked that she did that. So we got to experience things, but she never made us like have to be.
Yeah, it should be a choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, actually talking about religion and rituals and practices, are there any way that you let me start again. Talking about religion and specific rituals and practices, which ones do you do to honor your ancestors and tradition or the where you come from?
I think definitely the music. And then I think definitely try to activate, in the glory of their mission. Even with ancestors and not like the direct, descendants. I just can feel the glory of their mission and their life. And I try to activate in that. And I think like Octavia E. Butler, who has written all of these books that are, in the field of science fiction or speculative fiction, but she really is almost always talking about us and our practices. I think with Parable of the Sower, she had a 15-year-old girl like create a belief system called Earthseed, kind of based on the plants and nature and how things work and collaborate together, and also being brave enough to actually say what you see and say where you are and then activate out of it into something that's very unknown. And so that has been very inspirational to me. I just will claim Octavia as an ancestor, that she was like a young person will say what's happening immediately. And older people tend to want to hold on to what they have, and even if it's falling apart, young people will be like, why are you holding on to this? Like, it's not going to be here in 10 years. Like, let's go now. And, older people want to know, but where are we going? And she's like, we don't know. Like, let's just go. Let's have the practices within us and on our bodies about what we need to do. Let's study, let's learn. And that's why I did the opera. Like, I was like, well, what happens if I use this opera as a way to gather people, have people work together and form alliances on the ideas that a lot of the things that we think exist are not going to exist in the near future, just because of our behaviors and just because of how violent humans are on the planet. And what does it mean for us to like take that very seriously and activate around it, even if it means some of our activation will be using the broken systems that got us here in the first place.
I mean, I was going to say, is that age or is it generational? Because like when I was younger, I didn't really have a vision about where I was going. And now I'm a bit older. It feels like I'm like, you must be doing this. You should. And I still want to let go, have that flow, but in a direction that's, not a legacy, but, of values.
I think it's when I don't know that you have to have a mission, because when you hear even people who are being interviewed now on the news, they're, around what's been happening in Gaza, Sudan, Haiti, all of the places around the world where something really horrible is happening. Like they're learning, right? They're like, actually, I didn't know this information. I've seen lots of people say, I didn't understand, that this is what the situation was. And then as soon as I understood what it was, and then I realized the school I go to has been making money off of it, it enraged me. And so I was like, I'm not going to take a class. I'm going to do something about this. And it's the same thing how a lot of us in the States were about apartheid in South Africa. When I grew up, did I know about apartheid in South Africa? I didn't know about apartheid. But then all of a sudden, I'm like a high school student and like hanging out with college. And then we're like, wait a minute, are we paying for this? Like, is all of these singers going over and playing in this place? Like, and then that's when we were like, no, not on my watch. So I don't know that I always, was woke to every issue, but I know there becomes a point sometimes where you realize something. The same thing with nuclear power. Like they used to send the nuclear power people to the high schools to tell the kids what nuclear power was. And so we would get excited about it. And I remember this assembly, I will never forget it. This guy starts talking about nuclear power, and one kid gets up and says, hey, what happens to all of the stuff? You know, because I read something about waste, what happens? And he says, well, we don't have an answer for it. And they're like, well, then why are you doing it? And he's like, because it's a necessary byproduct, but it's your generation that will solve the problem. And when he said that, all of these people got up and started crying. Like these girls started crying. You know, when you cry and you try to talk and cry at the same time. I would never forget it. She's like, what do you mean? Anyhow, and then somebody else said, that's not right. You know, I mean, the thing had to end because people were so upset. So sometimes it's just like that, giving yourself permission to have your emotional response to something that doesn't make any sense is something that I think a lot of young people do. Whereas, you know, when you're older, you kind of try to put it in a balance and survive. Even though it's not right, you're like, let me just get the nuclear power. Let me just, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, it can be reasonable almost, even though you're like, that's terrible.
Yeah. So self-education and being aware is like critical at any age, actually, right?
You know me right now. Everybody's on deck. I don't care how old you are.
Get on the ship.
Get on it.
I just want to say that the folks listening can't see us, so they might think that we look really old and decrepit the way that we've been talking about. And listener, I want you to know that all three of us are very cute.
We're very cute.
Okay,
we're so cute.
All right.
We should be on film.
We should. That's my media activism right now.
I mean, I'm talking about like 200 or 300 years of you know, technological genius. So you know, and we talk about our ancestors, so we are out here.
Yeah, we are. I mean, actually, I usually ask people on the podcast what their life purpose is, which is a huge question. But I saw this TED Talk once, and he was like, you know, what's your name? What do you do? Who do you do it for? Why do you like to do it? And how does it make you feel? But I mean, usually, you know, people are willing to share. But I mean, you said you turned to music at 13. You know, you've been a media activist and you know. I
think for me, I've done a lot of things as my career. I'm making more air quotes. Yeah. But I think my job in the world is to connect disparate dots. Like, I think I'm somebody who is like, oh, that's a constellation. Oh, ding, 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 ding. These things are connected. You don't know that they're connected, but now you know that they're connected, and shine a light on that. I think that's my job. And I do that whether it's during my time at Mozilla and talk about what movement building is and how technology is inextricably linked to any other group of people or issue or movement that you're interested in or care about. There's no way that it's not touching our lives, whether it's my time at Estrella, whether it's as a filmmaker or a performer or a chef, you know, like I think it is to connect dots. And I consider myself a movement strategist, and I think I'm able to think strategically and think about our movements strategically because of that ability to connect dots and to not be afraid of or not be confined to presupposed boundaries. So I think that's, and it's funny because I started to think about this when you were asking about our ancestors and listening to and Toshi and I actually share a bunch of language because we've been in collaboration in one way or another for 30 years. And so technology is one of the technology congregation in terms of words and currency. And so really thinking about currency beyond money resource, like just understanding that as one kind of currency, but that time is a currency, that talent, that personhood are currencies. And so I'll hear her now on stage often say like money currency or this kind of currency. And that's something that we've taken out of each other's mouths. And I don't remember who said it first, but that's something, but technology, currency, and congregations are words that we use synchronously, not necessarily exactly the same way, but that's something that has come out of the virtue of our collaboration. The other thing that I was thinking was that I don't consider myself naive, but I definitely like have these really kind of dumb to me moments of like, really, you didn't see that before, you didn't think that before. And it was during the last U.S. administration, that orange person. I won't name names because I'm not trying to invoke anybody, but and you know, I'm only a first and second generation American, but something about being the kid of immigrant family, like you're like, I'm from here, you know, like I'm that's my job, is to actually be from here. And I was like, oh, maybe this isn't permanent. And I hadn't ever thought that way before. But I do think that all my work, my film work, also has always been around diasporas, and that I work in this way that is really indicative of that. And I think that on my maternal side, my grandmother is a dancer and my grandfather was a pianist and singer. And they were in love to the day he died. Like, they were very in love with one another and lived life like in this very like gorgeous and abundant way. But they both had endured a lot. My grandmother walked through 4 countries to survive, and before her family was found, because they were descendants of somebody who had sued God, actually, and that lineage, they were recognized for that, and somebody sponsored them to come to the United States. And so I think that juxtaposition, and then on my father's side of the family, Alotta means to fight, but apparently my great grandfather's nickname was Maolo, which is the soft underbelly of the sheep once it's been sheared, and that contradiction is who we are. And I think when I found that out when I was like 28. And I was like, oh shit, am I allowed to? Yeah. And I was like, that's the truest thing in the world. And I think that kind of juxtaposition of like commitment to pleasure while enduring such difficult things, and being willing to fight, but being so gentle and generous. I think that I've inherited that so much from my people without question. And I think, and the sort of like, you're going to take this and be in new lands kind of thing, I think is like a deep truth that's like pretty core to me.
Yeah, I heard that as well, like break oppression through joy. You know, we go through so much, and, you know, there's only so many ways you can do it, and how to experience it through joy. And that's, you know, the thing about music as well, like how do we break through these barriers with music, and how does it impact and influence your life, and what can you do? Yeah. What made you do this podcast? Good question. I mean, I've always loved to bring people together, and with the background in culture management and diversity and inclusion, I just saw a gap in terms of like, I always love music, and I think that is a universal language that people, no matter where you are from, and I've been on so many dance floors and in clubs and, you know, watching bands, and you can turn to the person next to you and it doesn't matter who they are, you're completely connected. And I've met so many great people that way. And I just, you know, I wanted to share the human side and the people behind the music and stories, but also that anyone can experience these things. You know, you don't have to necessarily be a great singer or, you know, play, you know, loads of instruments, but you can still, you know, music still has an impact on people's lives. And I really wanted to sort of also share unheard voices. We hear a lot of the same voices most of the time. Yeah. And I just want to, you know, in terms of that congregation, just expand it around so that we can all share our experiences and, you know, bring people together and understand ourselves a little bit more.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, and I'm so glad you're here. I mean, as it is about music, you know, is there a song or a moment that, you know, you've experienced that holds special meaning for you, either when you're performing or just in general?
Oh my God, there's so many. It's literally endless. I've been really had a very beautiful path with music. People are like, your career is so, you know, it's like interesting, but it's I've been able to have a really good long career, and I've been in collaboration with all kinds of people, and some of them are very famous and well known, and some of them You know them if you know them. And I've also been able to collaborate across a spectrum of genres of music. My music, a lot of times people are like, well, what is it? Is it soul? Is it funk? Is it rock? You know, what is it? And I'm like, it's good. And,
Yes, yeah.
you know, and so I just really, that thing that my mom told me when I was young, be a producer so you can do what you want, has really held my hand. So I've been able to share the stage with so many people. I just recently did this show at the Kennedy Center, and it's called The Gathering. And basically, I was it's with a 80-person orchestra, and the idea was like a call and response idea. So I was a great composer named Courtney Bryan wrote a piece, and then they asked me to respond to her piece, and they called it a sonic ring shout. And I did it, and I don't know if people know about the ring shout. It comes from the Gullah Geechee Islands. It's another beautiful technology from our ancestors. And it's a particular kind of singing and dance, religious singing dance that go together, that operates in a circle. And you can Google and see online. But it's a kind of singing and motion that like everybody can't do. Like I can never do it. Like it's just you look at it and you're like, oh, that's simple. Like I can do that. And then you're being like, wait a minute, how do you do it? So they would using that as a metaphor versus like the actual thing. But I really wanted my piece to feel like it was circular, and I really wanted dance to be a part of it. There's a very beat, bop, 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 like that beat, which is kind of a beat that's a part of a lot of cultures' rhythm, is in there. And so we were able to do this piece. We had a powerful orchestral arrangement by the great Juliet Jones, who is a wonderful violinist and arranger composer in the U.S. And then we worked with this dancer Malik Washington, and then we had the audience, and it's just like a point where everybody was boom, 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 boom. Y'all can see it on the Kennedy Center. Like they have a millennial stage digital platform, and our performances inside of that whole evening. But that was like when we did that, and we got that swirliness happening, and we had kind of 1,000 people all clapping, and the dancer is going, and the orchestra is going. Like I was like, yep, that's right. That was really good. And then when we do the opera, there's a moment in the opera where I break the fourth wall, and I'm using a story in the book that's about multinational corporations taking over lands that are easier to access because of the climate crisis. So places that used to be beach towns or place destinations, and I break the fourth wall, and I'm like, okay, where I'm talking about us right now. I tell this long story about people trying to like figure out what to do and losing their independence, and then having to go and work for these people, and who are basically setting up situations that are very close to being enslaved people economically. And also like they will take your kids if you lose money. Like it's terrible. And I wrote this song in 2015. And then every year, it's like from 2015 to 2024, which is when this book takes place. So every year we've been doing opera, we've been getting closer and closer to 2024. And then last year, I was like, oh my God, it's in a year. Like the book is going to start. And I would get to this point in the song, and I would be going, it's all about race. It's all about race. No matter what they tell you, it's all about race. But while we were on tour, the Supreme Court in the United States started doing all of these things, so they were like, okay, the right to abortion went, the right to affirmative action went, and then all of the states I don't know how governments are here, but the states have great power. So they start making rules about like, trans children and literally talking about taking people's kids away from them and things like that. And then drag queens, like they're like ridiculous, these different things. Meanwhile, like all this stuff is happening. And so I would just like get to that point and just stop. And I would just start talking about whatever happened that day. And then this thing started to happen where the audience would start to like get louder than me. And they would just be like stomping and clapping and screaming. And the show would stop, while they were like, we know what time it is. And that's what really I'm talking about when I say congregation. Like that you can put an energy into the room that people actually understand. And then they become from then on out, the audience is almost like making whatever can happen in conversation with us. So
amazing. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Y'all can edit that if you need to.
No. I love it. Bob, are there any moments that you've had?
Oh my.
I mean, so many moments.
So many moments.
Yeah, some that you want to share.
Well, we saw Prince. I've seen Prince a couple of times, but we went to this specific Prince show that it was drama to get tickets. You had to get picked, blah, blah, blah. It was a 4-hour concert. And he did it in these different acts. And one was him doing like the new music of his band at the time, which was jazz. Another act was him, if he were a DJ, it was all covers, what he would like to hear. Then the third act was him sitting at the piano by himself, singing all of his classics, which had the crowd like literally like in a euphoric craze. This very straight man started running down the aisles going, "You can have me." Like, you can have me.
Yes. And Prince could turn anyone.
Yeah, turn anyone out. And then he did an encore. So that was one of the greatest. There are people who you're like, "Oh, I wish I saw." I'm very grateful I was in that room.
45 minutes of encore.
Yeah, 45 minutes of encore. It was an over 4-hour concert.
Because he always did these things.
Yeah.
Putting up the after show, and we looked at each other and we're like, we're not going to the after thing. So it's like, we did it.
But honestly, the person I've seen live most in my life is Toshi at this point. And so that's been super interesting. Do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but one year I was like, "You've gotten a lot better."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like, there was just this moment where I was like, you play guitar in a way that's more interesting. You're like, it was super interesting to.
That's because I got obsessed with this one record. I did a show with these people, and the guitar player from the show was so interesting to me. And so I got really listened to his guitar playing, and then also June Millington's guitar playing. And so I just able to find myself a little more from those teachers. But yeah, when I first started playing, I just remember you coming into the Fez with like 15 people. Like, you would bring so many people back in the day. It was great.
Yeah. So that's been actually very like, we have this very like intimate relationship around your music, because I've filmed you probably more than anybody else have. I like, so it's super interesting to see your mastery kind of take shape.
And Songs of the Living, like...
Yeah. So that's, I knew we were going to have this collaboration. So Songs of the Living is something that Toshi began out of alongside of the opera, right? So as the opera, here, let me tell your story. So as the opera would travel from place to place, Toshi would be like, it's an opera, and it's an expensive opera, even if it's in a non-traditional operatic format. The format's traditional. The music is non-traditional for that. But that means they're being held in institutions often that are divorced from the very community that the opera is meant to serve. And so Toshi's done the good work of creating something called the Parable Path, where she collaborates with local community, and so that there was always this enormous. I'm telling the story short, but there's always this enormous. Well, it's enough for this, right?
I just want to say one thing though about the institutions, because I think it's important to say. So it definitely was produced in the opera did something that a lot of theatrical pieces don't do, which is it had a very short kind of workshop. So usually if you see a big production, they've workshopped it for years. It's had runs, it's done all these things. And we had a very short one. And most of the people in the first year produced the opera without seeing it. And so I just want to acknowledge that we went to scale, which means like from the little workshops to like we're in a 1,400 seat or 2,000 seat theatrical space. And it's important to say, just because what it meant is that there were people inside of institutions who were like, I want this particular work to come into our area so we can have these particular conversations. And so that didn't change the price of what it meant to produce you're right, the thing, but it actually made most of them think innovatively about how not to pass that expense onto a ticket, because they were trying to get this vibrant work that a lot of people were aware of. They were trying to get their communities together in these spaces. And then the Parable Path worked around that over the course of time.
Mm-hmm. And then Songs of the Living started as an offshoot of the Parable Path that Toshi first did at Lincoln Center. And Toshi's a New York artist and has a deep following in New York. So in collaboration with 3 different institutions, but really of different scale and size and in different places in the city, they were able to just put out a call and say, come sing with Toshi. And hundreds of people came to sing. And during the pandemic, like many festivals, MozFest went online. And so we ran 21 hours a day. So we weren't privileging any time zone. And we had 10,000 people from 148 countries. And we built a virtual reality space with Toshi around Parable of the Sower, and held space virtually in this in VR space. And so that kind of grew over the course of a couple of years. And in that time, people started going back outside. Songs of the Living happened. And last year here in Amsterdam, we held a conversation together called Technology of the Living, and brought Toshi together with other artists to have this conversation that really mirrors the conversation we're all having today. And then we knew we would be back in Amsterdam, or the Netherlands, I should say, this year. And so that's when we started this formal Songs of the Living and collaboration. And last year, Toshi stood up. We closed the festival with, there were 3 rehearsals during the festival so people could come sing. And then we closed out the festival with people from within the festival to sing. But we knew we wanted to go broader than that. That's when we started collaborating with Together and Dedicated. We came to Rotterdam. We had that salon where we had the good fortune to meet you and lots of your comrades. We have 3 stand-up rehearsals for anyone who can join the choir. It'll be, this will air after that happens, but there'll be 1 in Rotterdam, 2 in Amsterdam. And then on the 13th, we're going to close the festival at Paradiso with Toshi doing a full-scale Songs of the Living concert and production with other local artists here and the choir, of which you will be a part, to stand up. And so that's really the arc of that collaboration, and it's in that same spirit of what does it mean, because in that audience will be policymakers around technology, economists around technology, builders, designers, right? Other artists. And so what does it mean for them to have spent will be funders around technology and other social justice issues. So we'll have been in this kind of really creative, collaborative festival for 2 days, 2.5 days, and then culminate in this sonic, emotional, psychospiritual experience. And so I want everybody to get turned out, and I want people to be able to also connect those dots for themselves.
I just should say that Songs of the Living really is inspired by Octavia's book, and inside of the book she has the young Lauren Oya Alamina, who is like a prolific poet and journal writer. So she writes in her journal like every day, and she says what is happening, and that's how the book is told. And eventually it's called Book of the Living. So it ends up being this like series of that, and then it is inclusive of like all the parables that she writes. And so Songs of the Living, the way Octavia placed that inside of her story, where it happens for her entire life, I think about that the way earlier in the conversation I talked about songs and the way they are. So Songs of the Living is my way of like really saying, okay, I'm going to use that tool as I have been already, but connecting it to this path that Octavia had created, which even if people haven't read the book, or if they're not like, I don't feel like I want to read this book, or why do y'all always talking about this book? The tools in the book, you just can use this idea of like really writing down where you are and thinking about what's going to happen next and being honest about it, and then making decisions based on what you know. These are like really good technologies to have, these simple technologies about being collaborative, where, I know there's love in this book. There's a lot of love in this book, but when these strangers meet each other in these very difficult situations, they're like, I need you not to steal from me, kill from me, and I need you to watch my back. And the love evolves throughout the story in terms of intimacy and making family out of people you don't know. All of that happens. But the functionality is like, no, I need you to do this. You don't need to do everything for me. I need you to do these specific things so we can get from one place to another. And so I have always appreciated that way of being targeted with your emotions versus like, I need every need met by all the people I collaborate with. And she is just like, no, you look at all the other species and how they activate. They have to do specific things in order to live, and so do we. And it's not everything, it's specific step-by-step things. And I feel the songs that I've learned are also like that. They're like, no, you want to do this, you got to go do this. You want to get here, you got to go there. Like they really are like teaching you a path forward in your life, especially when you don't have access to everything that you think you need.
Which really is meaningful that you're teaching those songs to people, right? Like they're not songs that are just supposed to stay in your mouth. Like, no. I think that that's also like a key part of this. It's like people are like, choir, I'm not a professional singer. And it's like, no. But you take steps every day. These are steps that have utility and that are wrapped in joy and sound.
Yeah, one step at a time. Actually, seamlessly going into our roundup of the end of the podcast, which is such a shame because I'm loving this conversation. But I have a quick fire round where I would love you to share your top 3 skills in life, or tips that people can walk away with. And it could be about music, or it could be about anything. But we've already mentioned journaling and sharing music and songs. Is there anything you would like to add that's made a difference in your life?
I think thinking generationally, passing things down. I heard my mom give a talk where she said something like, so who is going to replace you, and what did you give them? And I was like, I was like younger, and I was like, oh, I never thought about that. And so since I heard her do this, I've always made sure that there was in iterations of 10. When the older I get, there was people I specifically would like mentor or like show up for, and now it's a lot of people, and that I should hear myself in a way that I don't recognize. Like I know it's me, but it's not what I did. And then my mom said, if they're not bothering you, like you're not actually letting them be themselves. So you should get bothered a little bit, and they should push you. Like they should be like this. Yeah. And it's, and it's really true. They are all incredibly talented, wonderful people. Everybody's not in music. It's a wide spectrum of things. And I'm always good for somebody to like call me up and say, hey, can I just talk to you for an hour? I have an idea and I want to run it by you. So in addition to all of the things I already said, I would say that's the thing. That's an intentional thing for me to do. And I do really support like kind of right now generations, that teenagers that come up at any point, I think, understand the most about the times we're in, and the rest of us have like that can cover the spectrum of where we are. And so I think it's very important for older people to protect younger people, especially if they choose to be on front lines. And I don't know what it's like here, but in the States, older people are obsessed with trying to tell younger people to vote. They're obsessed with it. And I'm like, leave them alone, because Bob just looked up like how few people vote in the States. It's insane. Like it's terrible. So if everybody over 35 or 40 decided to vote, like we could do it. We could like do it. And I'm like, they're doing all of these things, and they are the technology of change for the near future. And so they may not do this, but we should get together and figure out what is the best way to protect that journey. And one of the ways might be through voting. One of the ways might be through currencies, and putting currencies in their pathway so that they can be strong and healthy and can survive some of the things that they're coming up against. But that idea of older people telling younger people what to do is, I literally just stand up and be like, leave them alone, leave them alone.
I mean, we never listen when people tell us what to do anyway. You have to be supported and shown and guided maybe
real.
1,000 times. You know, it's like, do this. And then, 10 years later, you're like, oh, I just did this. Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mum. Thanks. Thanks, Dad.
With the frontline activists, I'm like, nah, y'all get the bail money ready for them. Like, that's what you could do.
Yeah, support. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Bob, what are
my superpowers?
Yes.
I can taste anything in my mind and then cook it.
Amazing.
I can read a room really well. I usually know where I am and who's in the room with me. I think I'm able to do my work because I have faith in us. Yeah.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I got.
If you can see our faces now, the calm that just came into the room. I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today, for sharing, being open, giving me joy, giving us joy, and sharing your ideas and plans for the future.
Right on.
And to use our technology and voices for good.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, definitely. And we can't wait till this comes out.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I can't wait to sing with you and be with you. So
yes.
Thank you very much.
I hope everyone's listening comes to the party on the 13th. And then when you listen to this podcast, you feel nostalgic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will share with the community. I've already shared it with a few people who might join. So we can listen back.
That's gorgeous.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
I truly hope that you've enjoyed this episode and will join us for more. We are releasing a monthly podcast on the 25th of each month where we share our stories and insights on various topics like ableism, self-preservation, survival versus thriving, how to be a successful creative, and more. And remember, if you understand yourself, you understand the world. Subscribe now to this podcast for more insightful conversations and follow us on SoundCloud and Instagram at Goddess of Queens Music.